The official match ball used in the modern World Cup is a marvel of modern materials science. It features embedded motion sensors, internal electronics, and wireless tracking technology. It is engineered for extraordinarily consistent aerodynamics. 2,000 years ago, if you wanted to participate in a match, the only asset you needed to charge was your own survival rate. Let's strip it all away. No multi-million-dollar stadiums, no standard rules, no FIFA. Before the Football Association in England codified a unified rulebook in 1863 and began removing many of the most violent elements from field games, ball games were a wild, systematic extension of tribal warfare and survival training. Different isolated civilizations forced raw natural materials and human physiology to evolve along entirely separate paths. This is a cold, systematic breakdown of how four ancient superpowers built the primitive foundations of the world. Most popular sport from absolute zero. Your journey across the ancient athletic map begins in the Mediterranean world with the Roman Empire. Here the game was known as Harpastum, a direct adaptation of an earlier Greek sport called faninda. Harpastum became particularly popular among Roman soldiers because its physical demands mirrored many aspects of military conditioning. The physical ball was small, roughly the size of a small modern handball, tightly packed with feathers or organic fibers, creating a dense, fast-moving projectile. Imagine standing on a rectangular dirt field, split down the middle by a crude chalk line. Your only objective is to seize this heavy ball and move it beyond the opponent's side of the field. To achieve this, the rules allowed you to use your entire body with minimal restrictions. You could catch it, pass it, or kick it. The fundamental gameplay, however, did not look like modern football. It looked like a tactical struggle for physical territory. One player would clutch the ball to his chest, while his teammates formed a literal human wall, locking shoulders and using their raw body weight to block defenders. Opponents would counter by launching themselves into intense grappling, shoving, and wrestling maneuvers to strip the ball from the carrier's hands. Kicking the ball with your foot was merely an occasional option to clear space. Sprinting through a crowd of grappling men whose only goal was to drag you into the dirt was the primary method of movement. Injuries and physical exhaustion were common enough to be treated as an expected consequence of play. Your character is essentially participating in a highly controlled military riot under the guise of sports fitness. Across the world, China arrived at a completely different solution. Between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, during the Han Dynasty, human civilization engineered Cuju, literally translating to kickball. This is officially recognized by FIFA as the earliest primitive ancestor of structured football. The material composition of the Cuju ball was a minor upgrade. Raw animal hide stitched into a sphere and packed tightly with feathers. The device lacked natural elasticity, making every impact highly taxing on the skeletal structure of the foot. In the military camps of the Han Dynasty, Cuju was widely used as a military training exercise. The training pitch was integrated directly into military facilities, utilizing specific goals or designated openings to measure accuracy. Two teams fought for possession using direct physical contact, utilizing their lower extremities to drive the sphere into the target area to score. The tactical purpose was to train infantry and cavalry units in battlefield synchronization, spatial awareness, and leg dexterity. When Cuju evolved into a courtly exhibition for the Han emperors and nobility, the direct physical violence was stripped away and replaced with mechanical precision. The layout changed completely. A single net was suspended between two bamboo poles several meters above the ground. In the center of this net was a relatively small circular opening, known as the festive eye. Two teams stood on opposite sides of the net, completely separated with zero physical contact allowed. High-level skill was mandatory. The players had to keep the heavy leather ball in continuous motion using only their feet, thighs, shoulders, and heads, after a predetermined sequence of synchronized passes. The primary striker attempted to launch the ball cleanly through the circular opening. The discipline of this exhibition was absolute, where a failure to perform under the gaze of the imperial court resulted in severe loss of social status and formal penalties for the team leaders. Losing a match meant a literal performance review via corporate punishment. Then, the Maya did something nobody else on Earth had figured out. While European and Asian civilizations were still stuffing animal hides with feathers or hair, the ancient cultures of Mesoamerica bypassed organic fillers entirely. They harvested raw polymer latex from local rubber trees, mixed it with morning glory juice, and manufactured solid rubber spheres often weighing several kilograms. This leap came with a brutal cost. Imagine trying to intercept a flying 4-kilogram chunk of solid rubber. The kinetic energy alone was capable of causing severe injury upon impact. Because of this, direct use of the hands was generally prohibited, and the heavy ball could cause serious injury to bare limbs. Players were forced to strap heavy, specialized armor made of thick leather and wood around their hips, thighs, and knees. The game was played inside a narrow masonry alley. Your experience would consist of throwing your armored hip directly into the path of a speeding rubber mass, trying to hurl it through a vertical stone ring mounted high on the stone walls. This was a profound socio-religious ritual, simulating the mechanics of the cosmos. Popular folklore often states that the losing team was systematically eliminated. Modern archaeological data reveals a much more complex historical puzzle. Some interpretations suggest that elite or victorious players may have been selected for ritual offering, though this remains highly debated among scholars. In Mesoamerican religious belief, ritual sacrifice could be viewed as a sacred transition to the afterlife rather than a punishment. To find the absolute antithesis of this high-stakes system, you must look to ancient Japan, where the game of Kemari emerged around the 6th century. Heavily influenced by continental traditions, but refined through the lens of courtly ritual, the material design of the Kemari ball was lightweight, constructed from hollowed deer hide. The operational structure of Kemari completely lacked goalposts, point systems, defensive contact, or the concept of victory and defeat. A group of 6 to 8 players, dressed in elaborate, flowing aristocratic robes, stood in a designated dirt courtyard, traditionally bounded by 4 specific trees planted at the corners. The collective objective of the entire group was entirely cooperative, to keep the light leather sphere suspended in the air for as long as possible. The constraints of Kemari were absolute. Touching the ball with your hands or arms resulted in an immediate failure of the round. Players were restricted to using their feet, knees, and occasionally their shoulders or heads to strike the ball. The specific technique required a player to control the ball on their first touch, lift it into the air, and then kick it softly to a companion. Every strike had to be executed with a straight leg, using the instep of the foot to minimize spin, creating a predictable, high-arsing trajectory. Players continuously shifted their physical positions within the circle, bending their knees under the heavy, restrictive robes to maintain the aerial loop. Success was measured purely by the collective duration of the loop and the elegance of the movement. It reflected ideals of harmony, elegance, and social balance that later became strongly associated with Japanese aesthetics, serving as the ancient equivalent of a friendly, non-competitive hacky-sack circle. The modern rules codified by the Football Association in England in 1863 did not directly descend from these ancient civilizations. The creators of modern football were not synthesizing Roman grappling or Han Dynasty drills. Rather, they solved the exact same ancient problem: how to turn chaotic physical competition into a controlled, standardized social game. They stripped away the intense violence of historical field games, stabilized the material composition of the ball, and established a framework where raw human athleticism could be measured without structural destruction. Football, in its primitive zero-tier origin, was a rigorous mirror reflecting how raw human groups conditioned themselves for survival, managed physical resources, and maintained social order. The ultimate evolution of the sport into a standardized global game demonstrates a profound structural shift for human civilization. Humanity learned to channel territorial aggression, tribal competition, and the desire for dominance away from actual conflict, relocating it entirely onto a green field governed by mutual respect, clear boundaries, and a 90-minute clock, proving that true progress lies not in the elimination of the struggle, but in the peaceful codification of the game.